Lately, I've been hearing an awful lot of white people's opinions about whether or not Joe Rogan is racist to black people this February, Black History Month. And so here's some content about one of the worst offenders on the so-called left of this, Kyle Kulinski, someone who I generally consider a friend, someone I get along with. But this is an important segment that I need to do. So he and his occasional co-host, Crystal Ball, were talking about some of the Rogan discourse and the backlash towards Spotify for giving him money to recklessly abuse the responsibility of his massive platform. And in it, Kyle tells this anecdotal story that he thinks paints Joe Rogan in a good light. I'm going to play that story. The only thing I'm really cutting out of this part will be the part where Kyle talks about the details of the video that he is making, but Kyle talks about the result of the video he makes in this clip. And so to cut down on some of the time, that's the part I cut out, but I wanted to play this part.
So I'm gonna tell a private story now.
Okay.
And I think people will like this story. So it wasn't that long ago, maybe a month or two ago, where Joe got in some trouble he was in a conversation with, I forget who it was, but he argued, Bridget Fetisi, maybe it was?
Yeah.
He argued against paid paternity leave.
Yes.
And he did it pretty glibly. And he took a stance. It was very like, this is what I think about this. I don't like it. Right? And so you and I saw that clip.
Mm-hmm.
I did not agree with him at all. So we decided, coming in to do this show, let's cover that in the intro. I want to play that clip and I want to respond to it. Did you know Joe watched that video and then him and I were texting about it about a week later. And in a very long and detailed text conversation, he said in no uncertain terms, you convinced me. You changed my mind. I didn't know the stuff that you showed. And when I was talking on the podcast, I was just talking to another comedian, sort of talking shit, talking off the cuff. And I said something that now in retrospect, having learned more about it, I was wrong. And in fact, he even supports policies that go way further than that.
Yeah.
Like I was like, I support a 4-day work week. And he was like, I do too. It's like, well, that's way more time off than just paid paternity leave. You're like cutting down the work week so much when you do the math on how many weeks there are and like all the extra days you're getting off. UBI.
Yeah.
Because there was another thing that we were discussing about unemployment. And he was like, well, what if people are like sort of gaming the system a little bit? This is standard right-wing concern. I don't know who we heard it from, Ben Shapiro, Stephen Crowder, somebody like that, right?
Crenshaw.
And I was like, Joe, I support universal basic income. I want everybody to get like $1,000 or $2,000 a month. And he's like, I support that too. So it's like, so you support a policy even to the left of just unemployment. And he's like, yeah, I guess I do. And so now the next time paid paternity leave or paid time off comes up, Joe's going to argue in favor of those things.
Yeah.
That's not possible if he's a dishonest actor, if he's a complete ideologue. And also it wouldn't have been possible if you and I didn't believe in the power of persuasion.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, and by the way, I saw some of the comments on our video.
There's so much about this clip that is probably inadvertently, but the reality is it's dismissive, it's glib, it just brushes away the actual concerns, and it really frustrates me. But the central argument is that Joe Rogan isn't perfect, but he's a reasonable guy who sometimes says dumb things, but he'll change his mind and his behavior if he can be convinced. And this is, once again, Kyle Kulinski being painfully and dangerously naive. I would say once again because this isn't the first time he's done this, and so a pattern is now emerging. When Rogan apologized earlier this month for spreading COVID misinformation, he promised to do better. In less than 24 hours after that, he retweeted an incorrect report claiming that ivermectin was effective in treating against the Omicron variant. When the story was retracted later because that framing was incorrect and misleading, Joe deleted the tweet but didn't post any correction or reference to what his audience had already seen and taken as fact. And now his audience would internalize that the media is both out to get Joe Rogan for talking about these supposed COVID truths that you're not allowed to talk about, and that the media itself is hiding certain truths about COVID-19, rather than Joe Rogan just taking the opportunity to inform his audience that he made a mistake. He might have made an honest mistake. This mistake that was informed by his own biases that he's built over the past 2 years of COVID misinformation from his right-wing buddies. But okay, it could have been a teachable moment for his audience, but instead, he just deleted it and decided to recover from the backlash or try to cover up from the backlash. And so there's a difference between Kyle Kulinski and Joe Rogan having a text conversation where Joe Rogan goes, oh, okay, I guess that's interesting. And Joe Rogan does the thing that Joe Rogan does, where he will be agreeable to the person talking to him in any given time. There's a difference between that. Joe Rogan being agreeable to the person he's talking to in any given time, which might be Kyle Kulinski, and Joe Rogan's actions. Because Joe Rogan's actions are to brush off the criticisms and re-cocoon himself with his right-wing beer buddies and his comedy friends. Like, you'll have moments of clarity on one podcast, only to not carry it with him in order to make an easy joke on another podcast, and every podcast thereafter. So what good is that teachable moment if the person you're teaching doesn't apply what they've learned? And this has been something that's been gone on for years. This has been something that leftists who are not white men who have talked about this for a long time. The LGBTQ community has been on this because Joe continues to be one of the main sources of misinformation on transgender people, even though he has supposedly had off-air conversations with people begging him to be more nuanced with his opinions of trans people in sports, for example, because violence against trans people is incredibly prevalent in society right now, unfortunately. And when you are someone with as large a platform as Joe Rogan, who's routinely talking about trans people and therefore shaping the opinions of people who have not met trans people but are very susceptible either way to either starting to understand and accept members of the human community or to find another group or an opportunity to be bigoted or confused towards a person. Joe continues to spread misinformation about trans people. And Joe has had black people on his show. To say he's racist in the sense that, oh, he won't talk to black people or he thinks they're weird is like hard to say, of course, because he's had black people on his show. He's had respectful conversations with black comedians, black intellectuals. And there are moments where it seemed like his eyes were truly opening on race. His episode with Dr. Cornel West was one of the best episodes of the Joe Rogan podcast to date in this regard. But leftists can't point to those examples of Joe having a leftist here and a leftist there on his show and say, there, that's enough. He can be convinced. There, we did it, Patrick. We saved the city. That doesn't work that way. Because when Rogan has right-wingers on his show, not only does he have them very often, there's so many more Ben Shapiro episodes and Jordan Peterson episodes and all these other right-winger episodes. He gives so many more right-wingers a chance than he does left-wingers a chance. But never mind that. When the right-wingers show up on Joe Rogan's show, that's the information that Joe Rogan retains. When a right-winger is on Joe Rogan's show, he parrots their propaganda, even when it's almost always wrong. When someone on the left corrects Joe Rogan on his show, he immediately forgets about it, packs up, and moves to Texas. So racism or sexism or transphobia is more than whether or not you say a certain word or the context of the usage of that word at the time. Racism is action. Racism is hosting a massive platform where racist people can be given ammo for their hatred by saying, oh, is Michael Eric Dyson really black? What is real blackness? As though Joe Rogan, after thousands of episodes of doing this podcast and talking to black people about this very situation, is unable to make a smarter statement than that. If anything, I challenge Joe Rogan to be a better comedian, to be a smarter comedian, to show that he's actually growing his ape brain from however many years or so he's been doing the podcast. I'm using ape in the context that Joe Rogan uses ape, that I know is not a racial way, but he's saying like humans are derivative of monkeys. We're very like simple and monkey-like in that way. I'm referring to Joe Rogan as an ape in that context, but also in the fact that his comedy is kind of slow and fails to keep up with the times and instead falls into this, oh, I'm being canceled because people disagree with me kind of shtick. Racism is also responding to criticisms that you are using your platform to give ammo to racists to make it easier for bigots and homophobes and transphobes and all these other people and Islamophobes and all these other people who hate other groups of people to make it easier for them to do that, to give them arguments, however flimsy, to do that. That's also racism, dude. It's more than just saying a word. It's more than just having people on your show. It's what do the actions actually turn out being? It's after years and years of doing this podcast. Is Joe Rogan retaining more of the things he's learning from left-wingers or right-wingers? This is a really obvious question for people of color, for leftists of color, but for some reason, a lot of white liberals and white so-called leftists love to pontificate around this concept as though it's a little bit out there, as though it's a little bit unclear. When it's painfully clear for the members of these marginalized groups that Joe Rogan has talked flippantly about over the years because he's a comedian. It doesn't matter. This is my show. I'm not trying to be a political guy, but I'm going to talk about these topics and continue to grow my show by talking about these topics and then shirk myself of any responsibility. So for Kyle to say, oh, he's been reasonable with me before, I don't understand why other people are upset with him, strikes of a lot of naivety, but a certain familiar naivete to me that has nothing to do with race. It's the same type of naivete that he had with Jimmy Dore more than a year ago when Dore went on his unhinged tirades against others at TYT. And I've talked about Jimmy Dore more than I really want to, and this isn't really going to be about him. This is to note that Kyle Kulinski was a major defender of Jimmy Dore for a long time, and it only took the same things that Jimmy does to other people, the same things that people have said that, oh, he starts being a loudmouth, he starts just being a jackass, he talks over you, he starts to not make any rational sense, he makes clear he's just talking from his opinion and just it's really malicious. Only when it starts to happen to Kyle Kulinski does he make a big deal about it. And even when that's happening, watching this clip, it was a whole second response that Kyle Kulinski had to make to Jimmy Dore because Jimmy Dore is such a child in this whole matter, in the situation that happened 6 months ago or more. Watch how Kyle continues to treat Jimmy Dore with kids' gloves after being routinely, maliciously, and unfairly attacked by him.
I think you're a totally honest actor. I know you believe every single word you say. I know you're super passionate. I wouldn't doubt your integrity for a second. I think that the criticisms are absurd when people say you're a right-winger or you're a grifter or whatever. So I just want to establish here, number one, a mutual respect. Number two, a friendship. But number three, and this is probably most important, he's showing here, okay, Kyle is a good faith actor. Kyle's a good faith actor. He's an honest person. What he's saying comes from a good place. He's not malicious. He's not a liar. He's not a smear merchant. He's keeping it real. Okay, so we've established that. Wonderful. I do want you to take note, though. When it's stuff that I agree with them, that's their perception of me. You'll see when there's areas where we disagree or where they think we disagree or they don't like something I said or did, all of a sudden that assumption of good faith or that charitable interpretation, it goes out the window.
So Kyle Kulinski goes into the rest of that video. It's almost an hour long, where it kind of begins to show the beginning of the end of Kyle Kulinski's ability to have patience for Jimmy Dore. But that's only after Jimmy Dore does all of the same things that he had done to women and LGBTQ people and people of color, that Kyle Kulinski had been warned about way longer than before this moment, than before the moment we're talking about in question, where Kyle Kulinski has to realize that, oh, wow, everything that people were saying about this person that I've been brushing off was true, and they're warning me because they care about me to some extent. And the people I keep fawning over, the people I keep giving the benefit of the doubt, the people who give me attention to some extent, so we were friends in the past, but through their actions show they are not allied with the same people you claim to be allied with, those people Kyle Kulinski keeps giving a pass. And so it's not about Kyle Kulinski wanting to expand his audience. You could arguably make that case with Joe Rogan, but honestly, I don't. And even on YouTube, there's no such benefit between Kyle Kulinski and Jimmy. Kyle's been in the game longer, and when it comes to the male, white, quote-unquote left political space, they have a lot of audience overlap already. But why is it that Kyle Kulinski will do backflips to defend white male comedians who wade into politics to play both sides, but mostly court right-wingers? White male comedians who do effectively no political reading or work of any kind, yet have no problem hosting influential political shows and talking on influential political issues and making statements and assuasions that have actual real world impacts in the world of politics and social issues and life. Why will Kyle Kulinski defend those people over the warnings of the people who are on his side politically very clearly? The people who are in his audience who are telling him that the continued support of characters like this is making it difficult to trust that Kyle Kulinski's judgment and what he's saying and when he's dissecting the news for his audience is something that is tangible. Because if you're missing out on if Kyle Kulinski is missing out on Jimmy Dore and Joe Rogan, I got to start to question, what else are you missing out on? What other things are you missing? What other things are you too naive for? And where does this naivety that prevents him from giving his audience the best information come from? If I didn't know Kyle better, I'd say it's because him and Jimmy and Joe are all white dudes, and their life experience is more relatable to him than it is to the people who are being critical of those people. And I might sound harsh. I understand this sounds very harsh, especially coming from a black person, but I swear to you, I am your kindest ally in this battle, because there are people way more pissed off about your support and other people's support of Joe Rogan, and they see it as an absolute turning of the backs towards leftist people of color, and they have long memories about this stuff. You're asleep at the wheel, and the lives of marginalized groups are at stake because of your negligence as a host to not see your own biases and use your platform to speak truth and call out the powerful, like you committed to doing, Kyle, when you started Secular Talk in the first place. You have a little bit of influence now. Joe Rogan's at the center of media controversy. He's a major right-wing commentator, whether he knows it or not. And I think there is some demonstrated ability for Kyle Kulinski to change Joe Rogan's mind. So Kyle, you're in the position of power. You are directly in it. Are you going to be friends with him because that's nice for you? Or are you going to use that power on behalf of the things that you believe on? The things that you believe, the things that you started your show on. Do those principles matter to you? In the video I started the segment with, Kyle's co-host Crystal Ball repeated a mantra from another white liberal who tries to speak for everyone, Jon Stewart. So I'll play that clip now.
The key thing there, obviously, the entirety of his argument is don't leave, don't abandon, don't censor, engage. And if there ever was a guy who you could do that with, it is Joe Rogan.
Dismissive. Almost mocking of the legitimate concerns of people of color on the left, of marginalized groups on the left. If there is anyone, do you really want to check your words there, Crystal? Anyone like Joe Rogan, who has been peddling trans misinformation? Anyone like Joe Rogan, who continues to say racially dumb shit? 1,500 episodes, multiple black people interviews, multiple supposed deep conversations and supposedly learning these things. He's the reasonable one? Crystal Ball, what the hell are you doing? Do you have access to Joe Rogan? What conversations are you having with him to make sure he actually retains this information, to make sure he actually holds his feet to the fire, to make sure he actually practices this leftist knowledge and actually challenges right-wingers on the show? Because otherwise, okay, maybe Joe Rogan didn't sign up to do this, but this is the bet he's made. So are you going to give him credit because he's a white guy and giving him a lot of this responsibility right now that he didn't ask for is a lot to do? Or are you going to do your jobs as supposed political pundits who hold people's feet to the fire? Balls in your court. Because here is another example of Joe Rogan, who Kyle Kulinski and Crystal Ball say really means well, who's really being treated unfairly, who continuously is messing up. Here's where it actually fucking matters. There was a story Joe Rogan shared to his Instagram following of over 14 million people just a few weeks ago. 14 million people who are susceptible to the lies I'm about to tell you here, okay? It was about the Union Pacific Railways in Los Angeles being filled with trash and debris. And this was a report that was done on a number of different outlets. I think Inside Edition in Los Angeles picked this up as well. And this was reportedly after a string of rail car thefts that fits right in with a right-wing message being fed to Joe Rogan and that he's been parroting for months, if not years. Joe Rogan comments, LA fell apart so quickly at these images of trash all over railways as these rail cars have been looted. But that wasn't the full story, because Joe Rogan would have you believe that, crime is out of control and Los Angeles is just absolutely out of control and it's a mess here and people are just looting these rail cars and people aren't getting their packages and freight's all missing and it's all this fault because of what liberals are doing. But it turns out that, as is always the case with Joe Rogan, as is almost always the case, he is just repeating the stuff that is being spoon-fed to him by right-wingers and corporatists. And here's exactly how that happened. It turns out that Union Pacific posted their most profitable year ever in 2021. And that was after 2020 was also turbulent, but turned out being very profitable as well. And despite this, Union Pacific laid off thousands of workers, including Union Pacific's own internal police department. So by their own recollections, their own reporting, they had their most profitable year ever. This is a press release they had. Yet at the same time, they didn't mention this during the press release, but this is what they're doing. They laid off thousands of workers, including the people who make sure the rail cars are secure as they're in transit. So you fire all the people who secure the rail cars. All of a sudden, the rail cars are being ransacked because there's no one to watch over them. And by the way, a lot of people without jobs who know where the rail cars are going now, by the way. And Union Pacific has the gall to go out and blame the city of Los Angeles. BNSF is another major freight operator in the Los Angeles area, so they compete with Union Pacific. And they haven't seen the kind of thefts that Union Pacific has. This is the thing that Jalopnik is reporting. So it makes it really strange that Union Pacific is blaming the increase of thefts on the ability for criminals to post no cash bail in LA, which has made it so you couldn't have, rich people break the law, they can just spend their way and get out of jail. Poor people break the law, they're stuck because of cash bail. This makes the system a lot more equitable. But Union Pacific said, well, because there's no cash bail, all these criminals are able to flaunt the fact that they're able to just run out and do the crime again. Rather than the obvious cause of effect here, that Union Pacific had record profits, saw a way of cutting costs by firing workers, and then Union Pacific acting shocked that the job those workers were doing is no longer getting done. And so Union Pacific put out this thing that, it's LA's policies, it's defund the police, it's all this other nonsense, stuff that feeds into right-wing propaganda that Joe Rogan has been fed and has taken hook, line, and sinker for the past several years. Even with left-wingers supposedly in his ear on these things. And Rogan repeats this to his audience of people who are supposedly against media manipulation and want the real story. Joe Rogan is a simp for Republicans and corporate labor profiteers. And again, with Rogan amplifying this anti-worker, anti-leftist, right-wing corporate lie on social media and on his podcasts, I'm looking for, Kyle, where are your texts on this? Where Crystal Ball is the most reasonable man you can possibly convince, Joe Rogan, on this anti-worker, propagandistic bullshit? I can speculate very, very easily as to why Kyle Kulinski and Crystal Ball and so many others are blinded by the white of Joe Rogan when his actions clearly show he doesn't care about putting these moments of learning into practice. However, Crystal Ball and Kyle Kulinski are part of the left. They are part of my left. And so I'll give them an opportunity to continue this dialogue with myself and other concerned leftists of color. They can also choose to ignore me, and then I will simply become unignorable on this point because I know I'm right and I know they're wrong. And this is a point that me and actual people who have stake in this game, and frankly, the rest of the left, as far as the future of the left goes, cannot and will not let go of. So let me reiterate, leftist whites with platforms. You have an choice. Continue caping for the white dudes with large platforms who should know how to use them better and making excuses for them, or stop acting like hypocrites and stand up for the marginalized groups you make your livings claiming to care about on the internet. Because your actions will speak louder than your words, as they do for Joe Rogan and as they will for y'all. This has been episode 40 of your Power Report, and there's even more where that came from for Syndicate 23 members who get bonus segments on everything we do for Power Report, including this week we're doing stuff on the Canadian trucker situation and stuff on Gavin Newsom pretending to fight for Medicare for all. This stuff happens the same way all the other stuff happens with member support. And by the way, I am way tinier than Joe Rogan or Kyle Kulinski or Crystal Ball, but I've demonstrated that I swim in these circles. I have similar amounts of knowledge to them. And I actually haven't lost the plot of why we do this talk show stuff in the first place. It's to make a better world. It's to keep each other honest and accountable and be clear about what is stopping us from getting to that better place. And if we keep having this circular argument on the left over whether or not Joe Rogan is gettable or whether or not he's winnable, instead of actually applying that and putting it to practice, then it is just another way in which strategically the left will talk a lot of talk, but fail to deliver for people when marginalized communities are on the line because right-wingers are way better at this game. So go to join.syndicate23.co. Start joining for as little as $5 a month. Get all the bonus content. Help me support and get way more of this where it came from. You can follow me on Twitter at Dan from the Web, on Instagram at Dan from the Internet, on TikTok at Dan from the Internet. Also check out the Good Morning Bad News videos we're doing. I know I mentioned that earlier in the show, but on TikTok we just crossed 1 million followers, and I cannot say how thrilled and honored I am to be a part of that. And if this is not a part of that, there are other people who are working behind the scenes. I'm not the only person on Good Morning Bad News, but it is great to at least be a part of that team and to continue to grow that into something that is a really powerful engine for leftist political education. And so follow Power Report on Twitter at Power Report WRLD. Follow on Instagram at powerreport.world. And check us out next time. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, youtube.com/Dan from the Internet, or wherever you're listening to podcasts, Spotify included, because we're small, we have to grow. Because remember, the power is with you. And we're going to need your help to make sure that we keep the powerful in check. Because there aren't a lot of people doing it. There definitely aren't enough. And so I'll need your help to do it. Thank you. Have a good week.